The sister of the golden child got thrown out by her husband because she was cheating, so our parents asked me to let her stay with us. But then she began flirting with my husband. Okay, so here's what's going on. I'm 25 and I have a twin sister named Becky. We used to be close when we were younger, but things got complicated when she was a teenager. Becky was really smart in school, much smarter than me. So when she was in 8th grade, she got offered a scholarship to go to a really good school for smart kids. The only issue was that the school was far away and it would take her over an hour to get there every day. We thought about letting her live at the school, but she didn't like that idea. After a lot of talking, my parents decided she could live with our aunt instead. My aunt doesn't have any kids of her own and she's never been married, so my dad wasn't sure if she could handle taking care of Becky. My aunt offered to let Becky stay with her so she could go to the school she wanted without any problems. That's why Becky went to live with my aunt for high school while I stayed with my parents. We'd visit her during holidays and whenever we could. At first, everything seemed great. Becky told us she was having a blast at her new school, where she found people who were like her and challenged her. I was genuinely happy for her because I wanted her to succeed. I've never been the jealous type. I just want everyone to be happy, and I still feel that way. When she talked about her school and friends, I was genuinely happy for her, and she didn't make a big deal about it. But as time went on, it seemed like she was trying to make me feel bad about it, like she was showing off. For a while, I thought that I was just reading too much into it, but then there were a lot of other negative changes in her behavior as well, which my parents also picked up on gradually. That made me think that maybe I wasn't reading enough into this and something was going really wrong with Becky. This wasn't instantly noticeable, and it took a lot of time for us to actually come to terms with the fact that Becky was becoming much more different and kind of worse as a person. It started off small, like whenever we would visit her, she wouldn't talk as much as she used to and always seemed to have an attitude. But we brushed it off, thinking that she was probably just stressed and tired from school and needed time to herself. My aunt also said the same thing, and we were satisfied with that explanation. But then more time passed, and then she would get snappy and cranky at us for absolutely no reason. My parents were also told that her grades were slipping, and she was becoming quite troublesome to have in class. That was in her junior year, and that's the point around which my parents really started to get worried. They had been talking about bringing her back home for quite some time, but she was straight up refusing to come back because she wanted to be amongst people like her and didn't think that she would ever fit into the high school that I went to, which was quite an insult for me, if I'm being honest. In the end, things took a serious turn. One night, my aunt called my parents in a panic. She said Becky had taken a bunch of money and disappeared. The police found her not long after, trying to buy drinks even though she was underage. They let her off with a warning, but my parents had had enough. It was time to bring her home. Becky wasn't happy about it. She fought back hard and became even more rebellious. She protested a lot, but my parents insisted she come back with us and go to my old high school. They also made her go to therapy because something clearly wasn't right after living with my aunt. At first, we thought maybe she couldn't handle the pressure at her school and just snapped. But when she came back, she was really difficult. She didn't listen to anyone, not our parents or the teachers. She was mean to classmates, skipped class a lot, and I even caught her smoking near the school a few times, though I couldn't prove it to my parents. She changed a lot, becoming the opposite of who she used to be, and it happened gradually but dramatically. So naturally, my parents thought therapy would help us understand what had gone wrong while she lived with my aunt. We thought maybe it was the school or bullying, but it turned out to be my aunt herself. During therapy, Becky opened up. She said our aunt was like a helicopter parent, always hovering and controlling. When we visited, our aunt acted normal, but as soon as we left, she became controlling again. Becky felt suffocated. She had to study non-stop at home because anything else was considered a waste of time. She couldn't hang out with friends or do anything fun. It was all about studying. Even during meals, our aunt insisted on educational activities. It was really frustrating for Becky, so she started acting out. But Becky didn't want to come back to us either because that would mean giving up on a great opportunity. She didn't want to go to a regular public school because she felt it would underestimate her abilities. Our aunt had told her that our grandparents never recognized her talents, even though she was gifted too. Because her parents didn't recognize her as special, they treated her like everyone else. She ended up with a boring job that didn't pay well. Becky believed she could have done better if her parents had supported her talents. Our aunt instilled a fear of failure in Becky and made her paranoid, which is why she didn't want to come back home with us at first. She thought she wouldn't succeed if she left. If Becky left this school, she thought it would mean failure for her future. She tried to keep up, but the pressure was too much. So she started drinking and sneaking out with friends to relax. But she got caught, and now she's back with us. She regrets everything because she gave up a great opportunity to succeed. Now she feels like she's doomed to fail, so she doesn't even try anymore. She's given up on herself. It became clear that our aunt really messed her up, and then after a few years with little improvement, Becky was diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder. I wasn't surprised, but it was heartbreaking to know our aunt played a part in her developing such a serious disorder that will affect her for life. Our parents were obviously devastated because they blamed themselves for even allowing our aunt to take over and letting Becky stay with her. However, I didn't think it was completely their fault because they had noticed all the signs and tried to get Becky back home. But she was the one who had refused, and also our aunt pretended to be really normal and was good at it whenever we were around. So there was no way that we could have found out unless Becky herself told us about it. They even filed a lawsuit against her to try and get her to pay us for the damage that she had caused and actually won. All that money went into Becky's treatment because she needed intensive therapy for several years. She managed to graduate from high school with difficulty but couldn't go to college because she was not in the correct condition, and my parents didn't want to risk anything by sending her away again. She refused to attend community college, so she continued to live with our parents until a few years ago. She started dating a guy named Toby who moved in next door alone after our old neighbor left. He knew a lot about her because our parents thought it was important to tell him when they noticed Becky getting closer to him and always finding reasons to talk to him. Toby was really nice and caring. He genuinely liked her even knowing about her diagnosis. He told my parents he wanted to be with her no matter what. My parents were hesitant, but Becky convinced them to let her move in with him after they'd been dating for a couple of months. It was convenient that Toby lived next door, so my parents could check on Becky easily. After a while, they agreed to let her move in with him because it was hard to justify keeping a grown woman under constant supervision. They still kept an eye on her to make sure she was okay and not messing up her future or her relationship. Around the same time, they also helped her get a job as a receptionist in a friend's startup company because she was tired of being at home. They thought it would be a good low-pressure job for her to start with, and she could work her way up later on. Everything was going great for Becky. After living with Toby for almost a year, they decided to get married. Since they were already living together, my parents agreed because they thought it would be good for her. Becky even quit her job to be a full-time homemaker. Being with Toby brought a lot of positive changes in her life. She started behaving better with all of us instead of treating us like enemies. So they got married 2 years ago. I got married just last year to my boyfriend, Jack, whom I've been with for almost 7 years. We met in college and have been together since. Jack always knew about Becky since I introduced him to my family. But then Becky started flirting with him like crazy. I told Jack about Becky's diagnosis and warned him that she might behave oddly, but I never expected her to start flirting with him right in front of me. It was really inappropriate, and I had to ask her to stop many times before my mother finally snapped at her and told her to go back to her room. It was super awkward afterward, and we had to explain to Jack that this was just how she was. She had no filter. Becky would purposely say things to annoy us, and trying to flirt with my boyfriend definitely did the trick. But that was their first interaction, and after that, Jack just ignored her. She got bored after a few tries when he didn't respond and started ignoring him back. So they never really got along, and I didn't think they needed to. I let the situation be, but she was invited to my wedding just like I was invited to hers because my parents wanted us to pretend to be a happy family, even if we weren't. She was totally in love with Toby, and once they were together, she started being nice to everybody. So I thought it was okay to finally be a family again. We started off well with monthly family dinners, and we're really trying our best to mend our relationships and be a little less dysfunctional. And it was really working because we had made a lot of progress in the past couple of years. And I guess one could actually refer to us as a happy family now. But I guess it was too good to be true because we recently found out that Becky had been cheating on Toby for the past year or so. We were all really shocked to find out about it because we had always assumed that Toby and Becky were as in love as could be, and yet she went ahead and had an affair with one of his coworkers, no less. It was a huge scandal for the family, and Toby filed for divorce as soon as he found out. He'd found out about it by chance because Becky had left her phone unlocked around him and left the room. And unfortunately, that's when her affair partner decided to drop a text. It was like Becky didn't even care about hiding it anymore. Maybe she got lazy because she'd been cheating on Toby for over a year without getting caught. But when he saw that text, there was no way he'd forgive her. And honestly, who could blame him after what she did? After a long divorce process, they decided to sell everything, including their house. Toby sold the house and split the money with Becky. After the divorce, Becky stayed with our parents for a while, but they kept asking me to let her stay with me instead. She didn't like living with our parents because it made her feel like a loser still living with mom and dad after a failed marriage. She could have rented an apartment and lived on her own, but my parents were worried she might hurt herself or do something reckless if left alone. They practically begged me to take her in so she could start over. After a while, I couldn't keep saying no, so I agreed to let her stay with me. I felt sorry for her because every time I visited my parents' house after the divorce, she seemed like a shadow of herself, lurking in the background. It was sad to see. I couldn't ignore it, especially since she was my sister. But then, she betrayed me. After the divorce, I talked to my husband about taking in Becky. We had a lot of discussions about it, and we decided it was okay, because if it helped her self-esteem and made her a better person, I was all for it. So we agreed to let her stay with us a couple of days ago. But she messed it up in less than a week. Becky seemed happy to move in with us, and I could see that she really preferred living with me instead of our parents. It was weird because we hadn't been close since she went to live with our aunt, but it felt good to reconnect, and I thought we could rebuild our relationship. I was wrong. I shouldn't have let her move in. I did it for my parents and a bit for her because I knew she was struggling, and I wanted to help fix our family. The day she moved in was actually quite pleasant. We let her stay in the guest room, and she seemed really happy and at home. It was the first time I'd seen her so cheerful since the divorce, so I was glad to be of help. But things changed quickly. The next day, she started nitpicking silly things like how I decorated my house and the paint on the walls. It was annoying, but I didn't say anything because it seemed petty to make a big deal out of it. The final straw was at dinner when she started flirting with my husband. Seriously, full-on flirting, right in front of me. She didn't seem to care that I was there. She kept asking him strange questions and making suggestive eyes at him throughout dinner. I could tell he was uncomfortable, and so was I. She even brushed her hand against his on purpose more than once. I was actually speechless, and my husband and I left the dinner table as soon as we could without even bothering to finish our dinner. We went to our room for a bit and immediately decided that she had to go because there was no way that I was letting Becky live under my roof and flirt with my husband. It was just not going to happen, and she would just have to go back to living with our parents. If that affected her mental health, then tough, but that's not my problem because she's not my daughter. I tried to do something nice for the family by taking in a nutcase like her, but obviously there is no fixing people like this because they're always just going to be ungrateful. I should have known that, but I guess the human part of me really did feel bad for her and wanted to make her feel better because she is my sister. After dinner and our talk, I called my parents and told them what happened. I thought they'd be as upset as I was and demand I send her back right away. Another move back to my parents' place would be tough on her, and she'd be miserable again. But they didn't want that for her. They said I could either deal with it or let her keep the house and move out myself. I didn't understand what they meant by let her have this house. You can't just give away things that aren't yours, whether it's husbands or houses. I told my parents they were being ridiculous and they needed to take her back. But they said I was overreacting and it wasn't a big deal as long as I trusted my husband. As for my sister, my parents said she was going through a tough time and I should just ignore her odd behavior and keep her around because it's my duty as family. They said I had to help out. That's when I got really angry and told them I didn't owe them anything. Because she was their daughter, not mine, and it was their job to take care of her. At first, I felt like I owed them something, which is why I let her stay with us. But now that it blew up in my face, I wasn't going to buy into that anymore. It just didn't make sense. We argued for a while, and then my parents told me I could either find a new place to live or deal with my sister because I had already taken her in. They weren't going to make Becky move again just because I felt insecure. Then they hung up without giving me a chance to respond. My husband and I were furious because my parents' attitude was incredibly entitled, and I couldn't believe they thought it would fly. We went back to the living room where Becky was and told her that her behavior was totally inappropriate, and we didn't want her living with us anymore. Her reaction was insane. She started yelling at me, accusing me of being jealous of her all my life. She claimed the only reason she moved in with us was to get closer to my husband, not me. She said she noticed the way he looked at her, even after the divorce, and she believed he wanted to make a move. She thought by living with us, she'd make it easier for him to confess his feelings. My husband and I were stunned when she said that because it was just so unbelievable. After a few seconds, my husband told her to leave and never come back. She seemed surprised, like she hadn't expected this reaction. She tried to act offended and said she knew what she saw, but my husband wasn't buying it. I lost my temper and yelled at her to get out. She screamed back, saying she was leaving anyway because she had no interest in living with us, calling us a bunch of losers. She quickly packed her things and left. We didn't know where she went, but we just wanted a quiet night, so we went to bed. It's tough that your parents haven't been able to locate her since she's not responding to any calls, and she didn't go to their place either. Now they're blaming you for the situation, which feels really unfair. You do feel a bit guilty because maybe if you had been a bit more understanding, things wouldn't have turned out this way. So you're apologizing for asking your narcissistic sister to leave your house. Update 1. It's been a few days since I last updated you all. We found Becky. She was staying with a friend outside of town, which is why we couldn't locate her earlier. She's fine but still acting the same as always. When my parents found her, she refused to come back with them. She thinks she's too good to live with family and wants her own place. She's tired of relying on others, first Toby, then my parents. And guess what? My parents agreed. They didn't apologize to me or my husband. They just sent a message saying I should be glad she's safe. They're buying her a new apartment soon so she can start fresh. I don't get why they felt the need to tell me, but at least I know where I stand. My happiness doesn't seem to matter much to them. Update 2. It's done. They got her a new apartment. This time, they didn't text me about it. I found out from friends because she was posting about it all over social media. After we kicked her out, she blocked us everywhere, probably out of embarrassment. But I don't mind. My friend said, I don't care what she's up to, she's not worth my time. I tried to be nice, but it backfired. Now I'm done. I don't want anything to do with her. I still haven't talked to my parents. They still blame me for Becky going missing, even though she's fine and got what she wanted. Maybe she should be grateful I kicked her out because that's how she got the new apartment. Anyway, my husband and I are doing well. He's my only family now.